Welcome to my new mini course aimed at helping you kickstart your home education adventure. I'm Sarah Cudmore and I will tell you a little bit about my story in a moment. But for now, I just wanted to say that I have written this course with so much love, so many raw learnings, and I'm really excited to share this with you. I'm really passionate about making a difference to empower parents to be able to home educate and just feel confident that they can do that themselves. Um, so, what will we cover in this mini course? We will cover a little bit more about who I am. We'll be looking at the legislation in England. We'll take you through education styles. We'll look at the ups and downs of home educating, socializing, whether you need a routine or whether a routine suits your family. We'll be looking at learning in general, and then finally, we'll think about capturing your child's learning. So, who am I? I am Sarah, ex head teacher. I was a head teacher for 9 years of a primary school, and I was in the education system for 21 years. I worked in local authorities supporting other schools. I have a master's in education, and I currently have 8 years' experience as a home educating mum to two children. Um, I I feel like that's a great experience, but actually nothing set me up for home educating, and I don't actually use any of those skills to be able to home educate. And that's kind of why I've done this course, because I feel really passionately that anyone can home educate. You don't need to have all that background, but I do feel that starting out in home education is actually really difficult and really quite daunting, particularly if you don't know anyone else that does it. And so that's really why I've wanted to create this kind of content, to empower you as parents going forward, home educating your children. So I've started with the legal requirements because really, depending on where you are in the world, where you are in the UK, you need to be 100% sure of the legal requirements in terms of educating your child at home. So even in the UK, the legal requirements differ between countries: England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So it's absolutely crucial that you go onto your government's website, you find out the legal requirements, and you make sure you understand them. So if you're in the UK, you will have probably heard in the media lots and lots of talk about home educating and a register that they're trying to bring in, and it's all part of the Children and Wellbeing Bill. And that's going through Parliament at the moment. If you don't know about that, it's crucial that you do. I recommend to all home educators that they find a kind of governing body, a group that represent home educators, that can keep you up to speed with the knowledge. And it's really important, when I say group, that it is a group with some professionals in it, so that the knowledge is credible. So there's so many groups on Facebook, but the ones that I would recommend are Education Otherwise and Home Education UK. So if you want to go and look at one of those, the links are in the bio section of this mini course. But basically, you sign up to one of those via Facebook and just keep yourself up to date with everything that's happening. It's really crucial. It's never been more crucial than it is right now. And at the time of recording this, February 2025, it is being debated in Parliament as to whether there's going to be a register, what that means, what local authorities' responsibility within that monitoring role might be. So yeah, I'm not here to give you uh, lots of legal advice, but just to say that starting out in home education, do make sure that you know your legal requirements. Do make sure that you are linked to a group with some form of professional representation. So Education Otherwise, they actually meet with the Department for Education. They have people who've got legal experience within their team. So you can feel really confident that the information that's coming from them is absolutely right. So, but also, it varies country to country, as I said. So, for example, in the United States, every state across United States of America has different regulations. And, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Make sure that you know the legal requirements that are expected of you, and whether there's any monitoring or anything like that, before you start home educating. And so then we think about, so you've thought about the legal requirements, but then you might start to think about, well, how am I going to go about educating my child? Okay, now you will see throughout this presentation, and you may hear people talk using different terminology. So some people might refer to homeschooling, some people might refer to home education. Broadly speaking, home education is more of a UK term, and homeschooling is more of a term that you would hear via the United States of America. And traditionally, homeschooling was more about schooling a child at home, whereas home education is much broader, and can encompass many or one or two different styles to actually homeschooling. So you may hear that, and some people, particularly in the UK, can get quite upset by people using the wrong terminology. So you might come up against that. It's actually very difficult for businesses like myself, to market their product without using a mixture of those terms, particularly at the moment. So when they're hoping that their website or their product will get searched, they need to be using words like homeschooling as well as home education, because people in the UK still do use the term homeschooling to search for what we mean as home education. So just to get it in there with that. So then there are a whole range of home educating styles. Now, the one thing I didn't say at the beginning is that home educating is an absolutely personal journey. So even me sitting here saying, sharing my raw learnings with you, totally different to anybody else's. Well, they will be totally different to anyone else's, and that's what the whole beautiful thing about home educating is that it's a personal learning journey for your child and your family. So when I'm talking about home education styles, it might be that you dip into different styles. You don't have to follow one specific style. You don't have to stick with a style once you choose something. You can make things up. So I've got the word eclectic in the middle, and that very much represents the way that I home educate. So I dip in and out. I'm very child led with my learning. So if the children are into something specific, like my son suddenly became really interested in roller coasters last year, so we followed that lead. We went to Alton Towers and visited roller coasters. We did loads of maths around speed and forces, and we just did masses around all his passions and his interests. So I call myself eclectic. However, we do a very small amount of core skills, which is basic English and maths kind of skills within that. So and that is actually because my children have chosen to want to do their GCSEs. So we are drip feeding those core skills to support them in that process. But you've got you've got things like unschooling, which is becoming far more populated. Within unschooling, you've got radical unschooling and unschooling. Unschooling is very much child led. Unschooling doesn't mean that you don't do any school at home, because the the word child led means that actually, if your child's got a huge passion for maths, for example, they might want to follow a very school curriculum style maths, but still be unschooled, because everything within their unschooling journey is about them having some choice, some aspect of consent with this. And there's a lot of sort of boundaries that the families have worked to make sure that the child is at the center of that. So then you've got things like online schooling. So many families choose to use online school curriculums and systems to educate their children, where they log on, they belong to a school that's online, and they log on and do all their learning via that online system. Some prefer to do core skills via an online system. There are various different apps that cover reading and maths, for example. So there's a whole range of things that you could be doing, and some curriculums and styles are far more about the outdoors. Some are more about like reading and literature, and some are more about hands-on, like the Steiner curriculum, and things like that. So these are just to throw it out there. There's a whole range, and I will actually signpost you to a blog that I've written, which outlines more of the styles and gives you a little bit of a game to play, where you can explore the different styles and work out which one might suit your family, if that's something that you're interested in. So the ups and downs. Okay, so I want to paint a real picture here, because home educating is and can be the most beautiful experience in the world. Like, I know after 8 years that I don't regret anything that I've done. I know that I've given my children the best possible start, but that isn't with rose tinted glasses. It's not this beautiful dreamy um, flow of like us, all in harmony, working together. It comes with loads of ups and downs. It comes with loads of challenges, but they are all really worthwhile, because at the center of all of this comes your children, and you just get this whole deep understanding about each person in the family and what they need, and in my experience, a much deeper connection than I certainly ever had through the education system. What I would say is that for some people, the challenges are in their relationship. So going forward, if you're really passionate about home educating but your partner's not, that can be a really huge challenge. It's something I feel really passionate about, and that's why my website is full of blogs and full of examples, and I've got case studies of people's experiences in educating their children. I also feel really passionately, as I said at the beginning, that you don't have to be a teacher to educate your children. I started the journey trying to school my children at home, and it was the biggest mistake I made. I started really confident and thinking, great, I've got all this experience, I can just sit them down at the table, we can do a bit of this, and then we can have some fun with that. And they just looked at me like, no, we don't want you to be our teacher, we want you to be mum. And I soon understood my role was a facilitator. So for me, I found that in about 6 or 7 months into my journey. But I wish I'd known that at the beginning, and I'd known not to go into it trying to be their teacher, because for my children anyway, it felt very confusing, the different role between mum and teacher. So I've become a facilitator of their learning. We learn together. I don't need to know everything that they want to know. I certainly don't know anything about roller coasters, but what I can do is when my child shows a passion or interest in something, I can set out loads of different offerings around that, like being lucky enough to be able to go to Alton Towers and visit it, and look at talk to people in Alton Towers, and look at how they designed them, and look at computer packages where you can actually design your own roller coaster and things like that. I think one of the biggest challenges also has been the whole community aspect. So I'm here in Cornwall, in the UK, and it's very rural, and depending on where you live, so I know, for example, in Bristol and places like that, there are really thriving home education settings. There are loads and loads of groups, whereas here I can travel an hour to a specific group, and it makes it a lot harder to form connections, and you don't always form those connections on your first visit, and so sometimes it can feel quite time consuming, it can feel quite hard. So I would say, as much as possible, try and reach out to Facebook groups in your area. If also, I do want to say that if those groups don't work for you, set up your own group. I did that when I moved to Penzance, and I withdrew from that because my children got older, and now other people have reset up groups, and it's kind of an ever flowing kind of thing. But you have to think about what your children are interested in, and how you can best do that. Another very brief sort of up and down is the whole financial situation. So obviously I was a head teacher and I was earning a really lovely salary, and we went down to one salary, which felt so hard at the start. But actually, I feel really grateful. I feel like it's probably been the best thing that's happened to us as a family, because we learned to really feel grateful for the things that we had. We learned to be a little bit more creative with how we did holidays, how we buy our food. We started to buy things in bulk. We started to do local shopping. We had gone down to one car. And whilst those kinds of things felt tricky, and for some people that might be really off-putting, actually it did, like I say, just make us feel really grateful for what we've got. And instead of working really 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 hard all term for, to reach a half term and have a little break together, and then we're all so exhausted at half term, we have a much slower pace of life, and it's much more even, and we just do things in a more relaxed manner. And so whilst that was a negative, it was also a really big positive for us. And then the big thing that I want to say is here before I move on is the whole thing about self-care. So if there's one message that I could give you within this mini course, it would be, whoever is going to be the predominant person educating the children or with the children most of the time, you have to carve in time for yourself. This is really important for anyone, regardless of whether they're a home educator, but the kind of burnout that people feel from educating their children is real, and it's really big, and I've seen it in lots and lots of people. And it happened to me 3 years into our home educating journey, where I was literally knocked out for about 7 weeks, and it was scary for me and my children. But I realized that I couldn't go at that pace, and that I needed to build in time for me. And I don't want you to have to go through that. So if you can build in really tiny little moments for yourself, so a few ideas are things like, where I actually started waking up 20 minutes, half an hour before my children, so that I could start the day in a peaceful way with a cup of tea, with a 10-minute bit of yoga. And before I knew it, after about a year, that had really embedded in my routine, and I started to extend my yoga, and then I started to go for a 10-minute walk, and then my children got a little bit older and my husband was around to give them breakfast, so I was able to go for a swim once a week, or just build in some time for myself, so that when I went into it, I felt ready to receive my children. I felt ready, that I'd filled my cup, my battery was full, and I was ready to go. It's really, really important as well. I talked about myself as a facilitator earlier, but what I've really realised is I'm also modelling life to my children. So if I'm modelling burnout and stress to my children, I'm not showing them how to look after themselves. So I see it very much as not just looking after me, but actually looking after the whole family by making sure that I'm taking these moments out. For me, it felt easier to do something at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. So we were taking it in turns to put my youngest to bed. And on the days where I wasn't putting my youngest to bed, I would listen to a meditation. I would practice some breathing, because I realized that I was shallow breathing all the time, and I was, very much in fight or flight. So yeah, those are ups and downs in my journey, but I guess I had to have the downs to work out how to manage them, and to be a much happier, healthier mum in the process. So so the next bit I was going to talk about was socializing, and this really makes me giggle when I think about it, because When I first started home educating, my biggest worry was how would I socialise my children? Because I was like, well, at school, that's where they get socialised. That's where they get to do all of their stuff, isn't it? And I was really quite worried about that. And I set out quite early on to make sure that my children that we went to lots of different groups and that we started to try and make friends. We also moved at the same time that we started home educating, so it really was a whole new start. And my son in particular found socializing really, really difficult, and I there were times when I really panicked and thought, oh my gosh, how is this going to work out? But what I've learned over time is that social children who are home educated in general, to me, in my experience, seem to be better socialized in respect of how they are able to be with adults, to be with younger children. When I go to a home ed group and there's like 2-year-olds to 16-year-olds all running around, playing together, talking with each other, respectfully acknowledging each other, not a care in the world about how somebody looks. They could come to a group in pajamas and no one would really say anything. um that for me is like the real respect that I have always wanted my children to have for other people. And don't get me wrong, people do fall out, and there have been really difficult situations for my children with other home educating children. But we've embraced that. We've talked about those issues. We've scaffolded the children to face them, to work out different ways of working things through, and to sometimes let go of friendships and just be okay with that, and understand that we don't all like each other, and that as long as we talk to each other with love and we respect one another, we can let things go, and it's absolutely okay, and our journey carries on and we meet new people along the way. So also what I realized was that socializing wasn't just about being with their peers, and that they don't just learn from their peers. In fact, possibly the opposite is true. And I know that people like Gable Mate talk about how children, we assume in schools that they're being socialized, but actually their peers are ill-equipped, in a sense of inexperience, to be able to support their friends with the challenges that they're facing. And that's actually where young people need their older people around them to help them to work through some of the challenges. I definitely recognise as a head teacher that there was no time in the school day to support social issues. So, they'd come in after lunch, lunchtime supervisor would fling 2 kids in and say, they've fallen out. And I would say, well, we've got to get on with geography. Come and sit down. And that really isn't the way to help young people. They need time to sit, reflect, and talk about them, talk about how they feel, talk about things that work for them and things that don't work for them. So I made sure that I got my children, we explored lots and lots of different home ed groups. I also have seen the value in them going to groups that are not home ed groups. So ballet groups, gymnastic groups. And it's actually really funny because the children have recognised how school-like those situations are. And it's given us opportunities to talk about, reward systems and how they feel when, everyone else gets chosen for a reward and they've worked really hard and they haven't. And we've talked about intrinsic motivation and where that comes from. So it's been really valuable in lots and lots of respects. Before I move on, I do just want to say that that I didn't mention earlier on, but deschooling is a really important process in the ability to then socialise. So if your child's been to school and they've had any kind of trauma, any kinds of difficulties in school, it is really worth considering deschooling. So that's a period of time where you take the school system out of your child and you. And I didn't find out about deschooling until a couple of months into my journey, when things started to go really pear-shaped. And then we started to deschool, and it actually took us about 6 months to really properly deschool. I am still deschooling. I am still feeling the urge to be drawn towards the sort of societal ways of doing things, and and having to go, oh, this doesn't feel right, why doesn't it feel right, and recognizing that. So deschooling is just a magic time where you just take everything out of the system, go back to playing, go back to connecting, you know, play with your child, connect with your child, observe your child, do lovely things like walk in the woods or go to a museum, or whatever it is, go for a cup of hot chocolate, or you know, whatever it is that gives you opportunities in a relaxed manner to get to know one another, to talk about, you know, the things that worked for them at school and the things that definitely didn't work, so that you don't end up replicating those in your home ed journey. And I mention that in light of the socializing, because actually if you start home educating and think and panic like I did and go, I've got to get them socially, you know, going to groups and things like that, actually if they are, you know, if they're in that trauma stage from school, it's really not going to work. And so if you take time out to enable them to release that trauma, relax, the fight or flight, loosen up, and then start to talk to them about, you know, what are their passions and interests, what would they like to do. Maybe your child's into pottery and you found a little pottery group that they could start going to, or maybe they want to do swimming or something like that, and it's just about finding things that they're really passionate about that you can go to. And the other thing that I did want to say is sometimes with the socializing, actually finding groups that have a common interest can be more so the other thing I did want to mention with socializing is that if you can deschool and then reintegrate them into groups, local groups, or you know, like the pottery group or anything that they're really interested in, it is worth noting actually that if you take them to groups that have a common interest, that can sometimes help children who feel a bit socially awkward to connect with people. Actually going to groups that are kind of free range, just social groups, can be really quite difficult if your child's experienced some difficulties with friendships or trauma at school. So it may be a really great idea to just start with finding a group that has that common interest. My son was really awkward socially. We would go to groups and he would just sit on the floor and not talk to anybody. But that was okay with me because he was present at the group. So we just used to take a massive bag of Lego, sit in the corner, get the Lego out, I'd get a cup of tea, and we would just really just be sort of soaking in the environment. And actually it took time, but then other children would start to come over and play Lego and he'd start to talk, and things really evolved from there. The other thing that I did with particularly for my son was I would say, look, we're just going to be there for 20 minutes, and after 20 minutes I would go, and I would say to them, you know, if it's really awkward, you can just give me a sign and we will leave, but we're going to stay for 20 minutes. 20 minutes was a kind of a nice short enough time for them to like just feel like they're warming up, that we go when they're actually having fun, rather than pushing and pushing, oh, we'll stay a bit longer, it hasn't finished yet, and then they start to feel anxious, and then we're leaving the group at a point where they feel anxious. So it's trying to pitch it, if you've got an anxious child, that you're leaving that group when they feel good, so that then they feel a little bit more excited about going next time. I have also, one really positive thing from socializing is seeing how just everyday activities like going to the shops, me modeling how I make phone calls. Like I'll show them sometimes that I make little notes before I make a phone call, because I'm not really sure what to say and what if I forget what I'm asking and things like that. So it's modeling how I talk to people, and how they interact. And actually when you connect with people, you know, particularly in shops, they generally respond really well, and my children have seen that, and their interaction with people in shops is just fabulous, and they're really not not shy about going and asking. They don't see this hierarchical structure that school models, where you can't, you only have to put your hand up, you have to call people Miss, Mr, whatever. They see everyone as equal. So for me, home educating has been a really positive social experience. So do I need a routine? This is like, I get loads of questions about this because people feel quite nervous, particularly if they've gone down like an unschooling kind of route. And even in unschooling, it is okay for you to have a routine if that's what works for you and your family. So it's about saying, what does my child need? What do I need? I'm a working mum. My children need to know what when I'm working. My husband works, and actually having a structure where the children can see those things happening has been really beneficial for my children. It's not a rigid structure where we say 9:05 we need to be doing this and we're doing that, but it's actually more about seeing the routine of the week and how the week works. The most so we did try having not having a routine and being more in the moment and in the flow, but it was really difficult for particularly myself trying to work with the children. So and also uh, um, one of my children being neurodiverse, it actually turned out that having a routine was like crucial to their kind of levels of anxiety about when things were coming up. So anyway, just to share with you a little bit about how our weekly planner, which I've got that little photo there, works, is each Sunday I will just ask everyone in the family what their needs are. So we've got a general weekly plan which shows where everyone, when people are working, when specific clubs are, because they're kind of set things that we go to unless we're on holiday or just doing something different that day. And then we go around and just ask each other what our needs are. So, my son might say, I really want to go fishing this week. What's the tide like? So we'll look at the tide and we'll plot in 2 times when he can go fishing that week. My daughter might say she really wants to have a friend over, so we'll contact a friend and work out when that can and pop that in. My husband will say, "Oh, I really want to go for a nice long run this week and a gym session," so we put that in. I might say, I really want to go to a dance class and I really want to hook up with my old friend, and we plot those in. So everybody feels like they've been heard, they've been respected. So everyone feels that their needs are being met by this planner. And the other thing that we can sometimes put in there or be mindful of is am I having some quality time with my son and some quality time with my daughter? Is there time in the week for my husband and I to do something together? And I just want to say sort of here that we don't have any external family support. And that can also, I should have said it earlier on, but can be an up and a down thing. So we've really had to learn, how do we manage date night when we don't have any babysitters or family support or can't afford babysitters or whatever. And it is amazing how you can manage those things. And it's the same as like me talking about doing yoga in the morning, and it sounds so perfect, doesn't it? I get up early and I have a cup of tea and I do my yoga. Well, half the time one of the children will get up early and interrupt my yoga, but I will carry on doing my yoga. That is my set time. That children know that because it's in our calendar. It's talked about, and it just kind of helps model how family life works, and it's been really really helpful for us. So this is a quick little section really, because what I want to say here is um, don't get hooked up on learning happens between 9 and 3 like it does in school. Okay, you will really quickly, when you start to observe your child, you will really quickly see learning happens all the time. It happens like in bed just before they're about to go to sleep. It happens on Christmas Day. It happens Sunday morning at 8 o'clock when they're making their first batch of cookies or whatever it is they're doing. And that is the beautiful thing for me about home educating, is that you embrace that. And like, we don't have a 9 to 3, we have a loose routine, and we do some core skills every day, but learning, we really emphasize the learning that happens out, all the time, 24/7. We don't actually do stick to term times either. So that was part of our deschooling journey. So we do our core skills a little bit every day, but we do it throughout the year. So we might do 10 minutes of maths and 10 minutes of writing work. Sometimes we might do an hour of writing stuff. My son loves creating like PowerPoints on Canva, and sort of writing and drawing posters and things like that. And some days he's really engrossed and he just wants to carry on, and then other days we'll do really, really small amounts, and that is totally okay. And actually, what you also have to remember is that because you are one to one with your child, or maybe you've got multi children, but you're, really, when you think about the class situation where they're 1 to 30, and you think in an hour's lesson, one child probably gets 2 minutes of teacher time, or maybe none at all because the teacher's so busy supporting other children. So if you're giving your child 10 minutes of really focused time on something they're really passionate about, that is really powerful. And so try to embrace all those learning moments. I've got a picture there of the fishmongers, because my son's really into fishing, and then he became really obsessed with the sort of biology aspect of it, and we went to fishmongers, we bought fish, we talked to the fishmongers about how they catch their fish, we talked about the sort of politics of fishing, the sustainability of it, and it just you see learning just sort of explode out of these tiny little pockets of things, and that for me is really, really powerful and eye-opening. And just leads me on really to saying that, celebrating and capturing those moments is really important. And I am really passionate about young people developing their own online portfolios that help them to maybe get into further education or employment. And I did create Collage, the app, which is an app that you can capture your child's learning and write notes. If you're following a national curriculum, you can upload it against the national curriculum. If you're an unschooler, you can create your own categories, but you don't need to use my app to do that. You can do it manually through folders on your computer. You can you've got this lovely like display here where somebody's collected bits of work that their child's done and put it on like a great big sort of poster, and they must keep that poster somewhere. For me, it got really tricky because my children are really creative and they do lots of artwork and things, and trying to store all of that was really where Collage was born, because I just didn't want to have this like the cupboards were full, and I was putting stuff on walls, and then when do you take it down and how do you get rid of things without yeah. So capturing learning for me is really important from the child's perspective. So and what I would like to say is, again, this has come from me asking the children, that's fantastic, would you mind me just capturing that for your online portfolio? And then as it's gone on, they've said, oh mum, can you put this on Collage, or can you capture this? And then my son, when he was about 12, he started to log in and upload his own things. So it's that in itself is a really beautiful journey. And I think when you look back on all the things you capture, the confidence and the sort of the oozy warmth that you get from seeing all the fantastic things that they've done is just really makes you feel great. So I do want to share that with you so that you can potentially think about whether that might work for you. That was a really short mini course, and I hope that throughout that I've given you a tiny little taster on the various different bits of home educating and starting out. You will get a little flow of emails following this with some other tips, some links to blogs and things. So do read those emails and follow me. All my blogs are on the website, but you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram, and drop me a line if there's anything that you would like more information on, or any courses that you would like me to specifically delve deeper into, or you just want to share a magic moment or something that's difficult. I will reply to you. So please do get in contact with me. But I just really hope that this mini course has empowered you in some way or another, or given you some little golden nuggets or thoughts about how you might step into the world of home educating, and that, you know, it's made your life a little easier. So thank you for listening.